What up, everyone? This is Nancy with Radio Jornalera. Welcome to another episode of the ICE Out of LA podcast. Today we have a super special guest, our own general counsel for NDLON, Chris Newman. So just kind of to get started and go right into it, I attended an LAPD commissioners meeting along with about 100 folks representing the LA Sanctuary Coalition, which is a coalition NDLON is a part of. The coalition was set to present our findings on instances where the LAPD has provided assistance to ICE since the siege of LA began on June 6th. What was supposed to be a simple 20-minute presentation by immigrant rights leaders was abruptly canceled and taken out of the agenda by the LA police commissioners just days before, without any explanation or any set date to reschedule. Coalition members were also demanding accountability and the full implementation of SB 54, the California Values Act, by LAPD and Chief of LAPD Jim McDonnell. So here today, why I wanted Chris to be our guest was I really want Chris to help walk us through one, like SB 54. Yeah. So Chris, what is the California Values Act SB 54? How was it won? What was it do? Why is Chief McDonnell not trying to implement it? Yeah. Walk us through.
Boy, hi Nancy.
Hi, Chris.
Very, very honored to be here with you finally. Thank you. Yeah, lots to say. I could go on and on, but I was hoping we were gonna chop it up with a couple of jokes, some icebreakers. But we can get right into it if you want. SB 54 was signed into law in October of 2017 in response to the first Trump administration and went into effect on January 1st, 2018, and it is the culmination of kind of bringing together California's sanctuary state policies with respect to governing the relationship between police, sheriffs, local law enforcement, criminal law enforcement, and immigration reform. And broadly speaking, it prohibits all kinds of collaboration, entanglement between police, sheriffs, and immigration enforcement. It banned 287G agreements throughout the state. It prohibited ICE holds, and it limited notification of release of immigrants to ICE, unless under certain circumstances. SB 54 became possible when Trump unexpectedly won in 2016. And it built upon several proposals that the ICE Out of California Coalition, of which NDLON has been a member since its inception, had been trying to push for. And so people might remember the California Trust Act, which was California's first, sanctuary policy. If we're thinking of sanctuary about polymigra or crimmigration or this kind of blurring of civil immigration and local criminal law enforcement. The Trust Act was a modest step forward during the Obama administration to limit the number of just blatantly unjust deportations that were resulting from routine police interactions. And then the next one we passed afterward was called the Truth Act, which we can talk about later, but kind of compelled transparency because so much was shrouded in secrecy, as you came to see yesterday, in terms of the actual entanglement. And then when Trump won, and I know it's not fashionable in LA activist circles nowadays to praise Kevin DeLeon, who was then the Senate pro tem since, has fallen from grace because of that recording where he and others were caught saying terrible things. But really, it was Kevin DeLeon's leadership, courage, and action, actually, when everyone was still kind of crying about Trump's victory. DeLeon called a bunch of us who had been pushing for, sanctuary policies and said, all of those ideas that you had brought to us over the Obama years, during the deporter-in-chief years, that we said were politically infeasible because we'd be contravening the first black president of the United States. He's like, bring them all back. And so a bunch of lawyers, people like Jessica Bonsall, NDLON's former and hopefully future legal director, Jenny Pasquarella, Angela Chan, the mother of Sanctuary up in San Francisco, we came up with some ideas. DeLeon, to his credit, stapled them and introduced the bill. And then what SB 54 ultimately became was all the provisions that we had initially introduced that Jerry Brown was willing to sign. And Jerry Brown was really an obstacle. And of course, as we'll discuss, he wasn't the only obstacle.
Yeah. Yeah. So thank you, Chris. And I feel like I wanted you just to like break it down, just be a lot of the current tensions in LAPD and even in smaller cities, right, like Bell, Alhambra, here, Pasadena, a lot of the current tensions that we're seeing between immigrant rights advocates, attorneys, right, just everyday folks who are doing the patrolling. There's a real tension of like what the role of the police is and isn't, right? Especially because a lot of what we're seeing of who is actually out there defending and protecting our community are everyday folks who get up at 4 a.m. to do patrolling, right? It's not really the police. But also there's been so many instances where folks, right, are kind of like what folks keep saying is that we with our own eyes are seeing collaboration, right? Or seeing kind of LAPD go out of its way or police forces go out of their way to assist ICE instead of the people. And that was something that was like the point of tension yesterday at the LA Police Commissioners meeting where one, right, it was supposed to be a super, like, folks have been documenting everything since June 6th began, right? And folks have questions for the chief of police, right? Folks have questions around, like, you know, the coalition has also kind of said, like, sent memos and said, like, hey, you need to update your manual. Just, like, basic stuff, right, of, like, how you function a big department such as LAPD. And even stuff like updating the LAPD memo to make sure even just the memo alone is up to compliance with SB 54 hasn't happened. And it's been, like, I think 9 months since the coalition sent that memo. And one of the main reasons that, you know, like, I see personally why that is happening is because there is really a terrible leader currently in LAPD. Yesterday's meeting for me was really fucking traumatic because there was so many people there and kind of just sharing different things. So, you know, the No Kings protest just happened and Chief McDonnell, I keep calling him sheriff because he was also a former sheriff. And when he was former sheriff, you know, he actually lost his reelection. So the people of LA already said, like, we don't fuck with him, you know. But Chief McDonnell there was kind of gloating that over 60 individuals got arrested, right, during No Kings. And that really kind of triggered and pissed off a lot of people because there was folks there who had been arrested and were kind of giving testimony on how brutal it was, right? So I think for a lot of us, like NDLON, that has worked to end the collaboration between Polimigra and has been fighting Jim McDonnell, I think for NDLON, right, it's no... Like, this is the leadership of Jim McDonnell, right? He will do everything. We know that, you know, LA cannot truly be a sanctuary with Chief McDonnell in power of the LAPD. So I think for folks who don't know that tension, like, so what was Chief McDonnell's stance during the fight for SB 54 and kind of how has NDLON in the past worked to hold him accountable? And because I know you all have also publicly, as NDLON have also publicly challenged him on a lot of his stances while he was sheriff and also during his bid for LAPD.
I appreciate the long wind up to that question.
I
know it, and I appreciate the way you're doing it.
Happening.
Well, because it's triggering, honestly.
Yeah.
And had you just said, like, Jim McDonnell, go, I probably, like, my heartbeat would go up and I would start swearing and probably embarrass myself. I still, to this moment, in fact, I think I put this on my Instagram yesterday, I still cannot believe that guy is the chief of police. Because you like to think that you make progress and then you don't go backward. It took a lot of work to get that guy out of, you know, the largest sheriff's department in the country, and for then Karen Bass to appoint him, and for the city council to ratify that appointment to be the head of the LAPD chief is such a betrayal. And NDLON is not, you know, we have no C4 or C3 organization, and you know, I guess I should be somewhat careful in what I say, but I think anyone who is supportive of Jim McDonnell leading the Los Angeles Police Department, if you're supporting that at this moment, that disqualifies you from being a leader in our city.
I agree.
And I told him and Mayor Bass as much. I was invited to a small meeting because of my long history, which I can get into without, you know, and I'm going to start sweating and get into it. But I honestly, when I heard that on my phone, and I don't know the term, you know, Mayor Bass nominated him or appointed him or whatever, I honestly thought it was a joke. So he became, you know, he was the sheriff after our last, you know, corrupt regime was, you know, prosecuted and deposed. And he was the single biggest obstacle to SB 54 at a time when the entire state had a consensus and there was momentum to, make flagship sanctuary policy. He was the guy who not only publicly opposed the bill, but partnered with the Trump administration to lobby against it, so much so that the janitors union and NDLON had to actually take him to court to force him to disclose records that he was required to share with the public under state statute about his dealings with the Trump administration. I mean, this is a guy, if you remember, to go back to 2016, I don't think he wouldn't answer whether he voted for Trump. I think he did vote. But this guy is like in the mold of like, let's get police and sheriffs involved in immigration enforcement. And, I remember having that meeting with Bass, and I really felt it was a betrayal and, or just negligence or something. But it should have been disqualifying. It absolutely should have been disqualifying. And in fact, I remember sitting across from him in the same distance,
God.
And I said to him, those arguments that you made against SB 54, that they were going to like harm public safety and all these kind of Trumpian arguments. I was like, with the benefit of hindsight, can you now admit mistake? I was like, we obviously disagreed in the past. He refused to do that. He said that his opinion didn't matter, that he was just going to enforce the law. And I said, well, no, but your opinion...
Obviously not.
No, I mean... And I turned to Karen Bass, the mayor, and I said, the number one job of the head of, police is to protect public safety, theoretically, for people in Los Angeles. And the number one threat to the city of Los Angeles, this is before the raids, is obviously Donald Trump. And so how are we going to have a police chief who can defend the city from Trump? And I've since gotten to know, and I'm happy to share and spill a little bit of tea in terms of the kind of reasoning that the mayor gave. Mostly it had to do with, the Olympics and FIFA. And more or less, she sat, and there are other people in the room, so this is not me like breaking any confidences. She more or less said next to him that he was the least bad choice that she had in front of him. And I was like, well, who are the other choices? Because this is a pretty bad choice.
Who did the scouting?
Exactly.
Who did the scouting for this?
And by the way, that's not true, because there were people like Bob Arcos who, anyone who's done immigrant rights or activism or protest knows, Bob Arcos was one of those friendly cops who used to come
negotiate.
Could have been speaking Spanish. Somebody who at least spoke in good faith. I mean, I'm not saying that any police chief is good or bad or whatever, but like he was an option. The fact that he's there is terrible. And because he's such a political chameleon, frankly, because that's he was the chief of police in Long Beach, the sheriff, and now the head of the LAPD. It does sort of lend itself to conspiracy theories, because he's playing, as you point out, he's playing all sides. He gets to say, they're protecting whatever protesters, but then he gets to turn to the police union and say, I'm giving you all this overtime, to police the protesters, as opposed to like, and I think there are legitimate questions about how he is collaborating or not with elements of the Trump administration, whether circuitously or directly. But he is somebody who doesn't believe in community policing. He has vitiated trust, and he's one of these guys who believes in kind of a policing model that lords over. It's the shields or whatever. It's not the kind of interaction. It's not the, and it's tragic. It's tragic.
Gas,
and by the way,
it
isn't just Bass. I mean, Bass obviously inherited a terrible situation. It was just an incredible failure of judgment on her part, and a betrayal, and all those things that I said that, and that's, but also the counsel, man.
Yes.
Holy mackerel. I mean, Kevin, for example, who I thought, again, at the time, champion of SB 54, probably that legislation, as we can talk about, has stopped more deportations than any other legislation in our adult lifetime. And he was the author. He didn't even show up.
Yeah, he wasn't even there.
He didn't even show up to vote no. I don't even remember. I think Nithya, who's running as a socialist, I remember getting feedback that her office was mad that we were opposing Jim McDonnell. I'm happy we did. And But then again, to back up even further, and I know this is, I mean, I don't know, this is your podcast,
No,
but like,
yeah,
again, I'm gonna share my feelings or whatever. I mean, LA should be the model. You are my guest
for a reason.
LA should be the model.
Yes.
I mean, people talk about Special Order 40, which was never really a thing. It was a philosophy. It was a statement of intent. And you know, in the 70s, and the philosophy or statement of intent was keep local police out of federal civil immigration enforcement for like everyone's sake. And, you know, that spread around the country and for many years, you know, created this kind of bulwark that has since been, again, first washed away by President Obama with his terrible secure communities policy. But we should be living in a time where, you know, Los Angeles, I mean, all due respect to Minneapolis, you know, Minneapolis is like embarrassing Los Angeles. I mean, I want a mayor to say, ICE, get the fuck out of my city.
Yes.
I want a police chief like they have in Seattle saying, I'll get arrested protecting immigrants. I don't want to have some Trump-supporting closeted 287G like friend of Joe Arpaio, you know, who's then like doing all these different, playing all sides. And I blame Mayor Bass for that. You know, the mayors in LA don't have that much power. And this is one of the powers that she had. And she flubbed it in a big way, and now we're left to deal with the consequences. And rather than have a police chief that could be repairing relationships with the community, defending us from Trump, we have what happened yesterday, which is, you know, a game of hide and seek for basic information that should be available to the public, which then, of course, contributes to this kind of sense of fear and attrition and anxiety that is exactly the point of the raids. The raids are not meant to kind of deport everyone in LA. They're made to scare the shit out of everyone in LA.
It's an act of psychological warfare.
Exactly. And here you have, in essence, an accomplice in that, in Jim McDonnell.
Yeah. I'm so glad that you brought to light kind of conversations you've had, right, with Mayor Bass in terms of her reasoning. I think for me, and I feel like, you know, you mentioned like your blood boiling just even thinking of McDonnell. Like me seeing him in that room yesterday, like, I didn't realize how angry I still was with him, or just like, he just invoked so much anger in me as well. And for me, it's because I also feel that Mayor Bass betrayed the voters of LA, because the difference between the sheriff, so the sheriff's represents, the sheriff's position is LA County, and it's a position that is voted on, right? The voters get to choose who their sheriff is. For LA City, LAPD chief is appointed. Yeah. Right? So Chief McDonnell, when he was sheriff, literally ran one of the worst sheriff's departments in history that was literally plagued by sheriff gangs. Literal gangs, the banditos, the Grim Reapers, who have open investigations, right? A lot of his re-election campaign, why Luna was brought in, was to deal with the deputy gang problem under the leadership of Chief McDonnell. And his election campaign was fucking crazy. My most vivid memory, like yesterday when I saw him, what came to like flashback in my mind was when he was running for re-election. He was literally riding on top of a horse in Venice Beach with a cowboy hat.
Wait, no, that was Villanueva.
Was that Villanueva?
That was Villanueva. Who, by the way, is like
rounding up folks.
Is like a civil rights person compared to Jim McDonnell. I mean, this is the thing that's crazy. No, that was Villanueva. But so Villanueva came in. Okay, so the TikTok of all this is this guy, for whatever reason, made some calculation to be the spokesperson against SB 54. Again, at a time when the entire state was, you know, trying to create what became a model, and California was the first, and then now we can talk about it. Illinois is way better. Oregon has, you know, Illinois and Oregon both have better sanctuary policies than California. California was the first. Jim McDonnell says, I'll volunteer to lobby against this bill with and for the Trump administration, in part due to the backlash that he experienced. That's how come Villanueva, you know, because people used to think that no existing sheriff could ever be defeated. You know, there was like famously like a dead guy won the election or whatever. Yeah. But Villanueva then defeated him in very large part because of, you know, McDonnell's coziness with the Trump administration. Yes. And then, of course, Villanueva had his own issues, became this kind of bizarre, you know, and that's a whole different podcast. Yeah. I do wonder where all the advocacy against Villanueva, like, where is it now? against Luna, against McDonnell. I think that's a little bit, could ask questions about that. But he lost his job because of his position on sanctuary, and then gets offered a kind of consolation, for the police department. And of course, as people might know, it's always been the case that police have been more enlightened generally on immigration than sheriffs. Sheriffs basically run businesses, and they're not private prisons, but they want to keep their beds full. So if the federal government says, "Hey, we'd like you to start housing immigrants," or whatever, pretty much sheriffs will say, like, fine. Police have to deal with more of the kind of, the protests and the real stuff in the city. And so there's been more of a kind of belief in community policing. And for this guy to go from the sheriff and then to bring that kind of mindset to the LAPD, it's awful, honestly. And now we got to deal with the consequences because you've got civil rights leaders, immigrant rights leaders, people taking extreme risks that are quite literally leading the fight against this authoritarian administration, and we got to deal with this bullshit in the LAPD. It is infuriating. And again, now the more I talk about it, the more angry I get that this guy's even there, especially since in the last year, first in Los Angeles, then in Chicago, and then in Minneapolis, what we are seeing, and you and I have talked about this for a year, is leadership primarily coming from people in the streets, taking back public spaces, showing courage, action, initiative that even our elected officials, leaders of civic institutions, churches, unions are not showing. And in some ways, it's like people on the streets have been doing the labor, and then they got to go through this guy and have to deal with the horses and the overtime and these guys. I mean, it's awful.
Yeah.
And the thing about it is that I think that there's probably, and I gather that there's a division in law enforcement where clearly you have a lot of members of the sheriff's department and the LAPD who are pro-Trump. And they're like, fuck it. Like, we wish we could wear masks too. We wish we could do all this stuff. We wish I want to roll with Bovino or whatever. But then there's another group. And by the way, I think it's a group that is growing in size that is saying, we're all getting a bad rap because of this stuff, and it's making our jobs harder. And like I said, I think McDonnell is kind of playing all sides. Tries to claim that he's enlightened, but is doing a lot of like wink and nod stuff to the kind of MAGA-fied, and that's really dangerous because a lot of work has been done over the years to reform the LAPD. I mean, again, should you reform it? Should you leave that debate aside? There have been progress that's undermined by this guy's sheer presence. Yeah.
And, I'm glad you reminded me of just like the power of the folks in the streets because I've really been using, although so the LA police commissioners, right? Why is that the place that we squatted up to try to hold McDonnell accountable is, right? Since he is an appointed person, there are kind of very few ways to hold him accountable, but there is this entity that exists that's called the LA Police Commissioners, and they're essentially supposed to be an oversight body to LAPD and to Chief McDonnell. So basically, it's kind of a bureaucratic space that exists, and word on the street is that he hates going. He hates being there. They happen right on Tuesdays at 9 a.m., so already there's usually only the regulars, right, that go. So what we know is that he hates when people show up. He hates that he has to even be there because he hates answering questions. He hates being interrogated, especially on this ICE stuff, right? From what we heard as advocates is that, he despises going there, right? So we wanted to make sure to show up in presence to make his day worse because he deserves that, right? And for me, during my public comment, I actually do think, Chris, that we need to talk more about how Jim McDonnell is a terrible appointee. We need to talk more about why that is a terrible decision, both by Mayor Bass and the city council. And because I think, as you mentioned, we are dealing with the real consequences, and the consequences are fucking real. It's not kind of yes, we're going there saying, please update the manual, but because of your inaction or just you providing mutual aid to fucking ICE, it's tearing apart families, right? Folks are being sent to basically death camps because of this. You're playing a role in this. So I do feel we do need to remind folks, and it's okay, right, to push against Mayor Bass, right? Push against city council, and also push against Sheriff McDonnell. So when I was there giving my public comment, and why I'm saying we need to talk more about it, part of my public comment was, I presented myself as NDLON, and I also presented myself as an organization of longtime hater of Jim McDonnell. And
chief antagonist of Weezer.
Yes.
Sorry. With a history of bringing down corruption.
First-time commenter, long-time hater of McDonnell. And I mentioned, we've been a long-time hater because Jim McDonnell has been one of the biggest opponents and haters of the California Values Act, SB 54. When I said that, there was like gasp in the audience, like,
yeah,
like folks really did not know, or so much has happened and so much happens every day, like our memories, And I mentioned, right, and he did not he did not oppose this bill quietly. He was one of the loudest advocates. And I reminded him, I was like, and also, this was one of the biggest reasons he lost his reelection was because of his open opposition and closeness of Sanctuary and closeness to Trump. And when I said that, his face just got redder because he already has like red cheeks. Like his face just got redder. And when the commissioners meeting started, it starts with him giving his fucking updates, right? And I'm sorry I'm cursing, but this is how mad he gets me.
Dude.
And it's my podcast. But so when the commission, how that meeting starts, it's like he gets to give an update, like a twin of what's happened since that week. And he gave his updates. It was like barely any information. And he said, but also, we were able to arrest 60 protesters during No Kings. And when he said it, he like put on this like smirk.
Yeah.
And he kept it on for like the first 20 minutes of the meeting. But just as everyone kept doing their public comment and just grilling him on the police-ICE collaboration, like he finally just took that fucking grin on his face. But when I gave up to say my comment, I was like, you know what, Jim McDonnell, I'm so glad that you wiped that grin off your face because police-ICE collaboration is no joking matter, right? Like providing assistance to ICE is no joking matter. And like the audience just laughed, but like he was, like, I don't know. I think I felt kind of like a sense of like healing when I said that. Like, you better wipe that smirk off your face, And I feel like it's okay to have that energy. I think sometimes we're also like, it's okay to have that energy. Like, that is what, like, you could give your public comment. But I wanted to say that just because it's so, like, I just feel like even just seeing him there is so disrespectful to the people of LA. Again, because we voted him out. Yeah. There was an election. There was a democratic process. And, like, even for us that worked on or even just were following that campaign, like when he lost, it was a celebration for advocates, for immigrants. And just to have him then put in this new position is infuriating. So I think, it was.
No, and I mean, honestly, it was tricky. I mean, I don't want to get melodramatic, but, I admired Karen Bass. Anyone who knows her knows that she is a warm person. She's got a good heart. She's a role model, leading a nonprofit and then becoming who, it did a little bit kind of remind me of like when Obama appointed Napolitano as like the head of DHS. I was like, wait a minute, she's like Napolitano's to the right of George Bush. What's going on here? So maybe she didn't know. And in fact, but it was disappointing. And I don't know, I don't want to like put you on the spot with your like technical capabilities for this podcast, but we could like maybe like stop here and splice in a video or maybe put in the show notes or something. People should see the video. Insert clip. Because like there was a moment, it reminded me when he was in the sheriff's seat, there was this entity called Zocalo Public Square that at the time was run by, the guy's no longer there. He's been since, I don't know what happened to him. But there was a big Zocalo kind of event about like immigrant rights under Trump or whatever. And I remember there were like reporters that were there, like Jenny Medina from the New York Times and someone from USC. And we served McDonnell with a lawsuit. Talk about red face. The janitors union in NDLON physically served him with papers like, we'll see you in court, because he was not, again, leave to the side that he was siding with Trump. He wasn't providing information about the extent to which he was meeting with them. And so we had to take him to court over that. But the final thing I want to say, which I think maybe takes the conversation a little bit of a different direction, part of what the Bass administration and the mayor herself told me is they had a huge challenge with FIFA and the Olympics. And the concern was, we needed somebody who's a police chief who could handle those events when the feds come in, which is a little bit of a kind of either naive or baloney argument because anyone who knows like the Super Bowl where these things happen, the feds come in anyway and take over the policing and relegate the LAPD to basically like crossing guard duty. And also, and this is something that I think people don't really appreciate, global sporting events are the places where all the new kind of biometric surveillance policing techniques are rolled out. And so I guess the reason for her trust in him to deal with that situation is exactly the reason for my distrust, because DHS will come in, the Secret Service will come in, the FBI will come in and take over LA, and give them all kinds of new tools, new things that we haven't even considered, facial recognition, drone technology, all this kind of stuff. And part of what is happening in the run up to that is, and it's obvious, is that McDonnell is trying to deter protest.
Yes.
And so, I arrested 60 people and, maybe there's going to be kids that get tear gassed or whatever. So please think twice about protesting peacefully during the Olympics or during FIFA. And that is really annoying because here we are in LA and it's a great place to showcase, all that's great about LA, the food, the culture, and our ability to protest for human rights when the World Games come here amid, the beginning of a world war or whatever. And we're going to have this kind of guy who, by his own history, leans toward kind of draconian policing, stinks. Yeah. And but that's kind of the game within the game in a sense. And people, and again, I don't want to. It's like a weird thing because I don't want to contribute to the deterring of protest during the World Cup or the Olympics either, by sharing the truth about Jim McDonnell. But that's kind of what's happening. I mean, they're trying to prevent large-scale protests from taking place during those events, and they want to give the specter that might be. People might get arrested. There might be, they'll accuse people of being, all the false flag stuff that they do. Like, the anarchists are going to come and put everyone in danger and give a reason. It's all baloney. And anyhow, so there's a lot to say. We can do the whole podcast on Jim McDonnell, but, be distrustful of him. And I think we're going to have to push very hard first to get the truth about his role over the last year during all of this terrorizing of LA. And then I think once we get the truth and the facts out, because they will come out eventually, we'll have to figure out what to do about it, both in terms of, getting somebody better and making sure that we have laws and policy and frankly, again, political leaders that don't let this kind of thing happen again.
Yes. And your analysis around protests is spot on, because there were some folks that were arrested during the No Kings protest that spoke as well. One of them was this older woman who was like, I went to No Kings and then I went to get lunch in Little Tokyo and was walking back to Union Station. She was walking back to take the train back home with her family and was part of like the group that got corralled. She mentioned that I told the police many times, I'm elderly, I cannot move fast. They were pushing her to move faster. At one point she fell and that's when she was arrested. And she spoke for like 5 minutes, just like resharing her trauma of that day. And she was literally just an attendee walking back. And there was other testimony, right, of other kind of photographers, media that were there, who mentioned what you mentioned, right, that what they saw that day was that the LAPD wants to make sure that people are afraid to protest.
Yep. And the tragedy is it's a catch-22, because as this person is testifying, in some ways he's carrying the message that Jim McDonnell wants.
Yes.
It's like this kind of like weird form of kind of gaslighting or psyops, because she like during the Olympics, stay home. If you don't want that to happen to you, stay home. And the reason that's so dangerous as we're entering this phase of again, is it fascism? Is it authoritarianism? Is it whatever it is? Our only peaceful, nonviolent sword and shield is the public square. We cannot. But his message is like, just stay home, watch the thing on television. That will be. And that's exactly what we can't do. And that's exactly what, like I said, leaders in Los Angeles, whether it's people like Ron Goches, who are, bravely yes. occupying public space, saying, no, this is public space. Public means public. We're going to be out here. Or again, Chicago or most recently Minneapolis, putting us all to shame. We need to be able to be out in the streets, building community and holding that public space.
And I think definitely putting leaders to shame, but I feel definitely inspiring. everyday folks from everywhere, and all the things that we could, step up and do
for real
to defend our communities. Like, I've taken so much inspiration from Minneapolis. So one, I think, right, Chris and I could talk about Polimigra and why it's important to dismantle police-touch relationships all day. But just so folks know, right, like, that, us squatting up to the LA Police Commissioner's office was a very kind of formal, just like, we're here, we're noticing. And during that day, we also printed these new ICE out of LAPD signs, fresh off the prints, as y'all see here. Right? Evolution of the ICE out of LA poster. Actually, Chris sent this to be made, right? We're one of the first folks. So all just to say is, right, is that as NDLON, as the LA Sanctuary Coalition, as the people of LA, we're going to continue holding both LAPD, Mayor Bass, our city leaders, Chief McDonnell accountable. And as NDLON, especially this year, we're going to make sure, right, that we continue pushing everyone who holds any sort of power currently to use it, right? The time to use the power you got is now, right? And if that means getting rid of people who do not serve our best interest, if it's in your power to do that, it is in our right to demand it.
Yeah, so. I honestly, again.
So yeah, any final words, Chris?
Well, I'm feeling a certain kind of way, Nancy, because, like, as you point out, this was the first ICE. And by the way, we did this because what we realized was no one would show up to a rally and be like, "Give us sanctuary." It's kind of like, help us hide or whatever. It was like a weird, kind of deflating thing, and so we inverted the idea to be something positive. Like, let's kick ICE out of LA, and we of course did this hoping to get a cease and desist letter. We haven't gotten it yet from the because that would have increased the profile. But the reason why I'm feeling a certain kind of way is that this terminology has gone totally viral nationally. Yeah. You see it everywhere, and it all started in LA. And meanwhile, it feels like we're on the verge of moving backward. You know what I mean? Like, or we did with him at least. Yeah. But of course, he doesn't get to represent LA. We do. Yeah. And so you're quite right that NDLON. I mean, we've got a lot of battles. We're going to be in the Supreme Court at the end of the month. Defending TPS holders. There's lots of stuff going on. Yeah. We are not losing sight of the battle, in some sense, peaceful battle of Los Angeles, because Los Angeles needs to be, again, the leader. And again, something went wrong.
It's our responsibility to
It is. And something, in some ways, it's like this kind of like metaphor, and this is like, again, a whole other podcast, and now I'm going to get potentially both of us in trouble, but it's like there's just too much political coziness in LA. It has been that way for a long time. Mm-hmm. And cheap dates as far as photo ops with politicians. Mm-hmm. We're demanding too little of our elected officials, whether it's the mayor, the council, our members of Congress. Why do we not have a member of the squad in LA? Why do we not have a leader, someone akin to kind of, one of these other, I won't name them, leaders in Congress? We got to turn that around. Yeah. And there has been a failure in LA of leadership. And that extends to the nonprofit, civic, and unions in the city as well that have somehow expected too little. And we do have to turn that around, because I think it's incumbent upon Los Angeles to set the example again. It should not be the case that Illinois has better policies than California. And if there's one, I guess, to kind of spin this to a hopeful note, the fact that Newsom is running for governor, or for president right now, and Pritzker from Illinois is as well. One day, if we still have elections and a democracy in a couple of years, those two guys are going to be on the stage. And rather than whatever pretty language or whatever pictures of dreamers that they're going to take with each other, like, they're going to have a record. Like,
yes,
like
on paper.
Pritzker will have done stuff to defend Illinois, and Governor Newsom will have done stuff or not done stuff to defend California. And we'll be able to evaluate who did more in showing real solidarity or, with the civil rights leaders on the streets. And at the moment, no question about it, LA is falling behind. It's falling behind, Chicago, for sure falling behind New York City. I got to speak to, then candidate Mamdani. This guy is like, he is a believer. He believes in sanctuary policy. He understands it. It's inconceivable that guy would have, in any way done damage to whatever existing. He's going to expand sanctuary policy in New York. And again, we're currently going backward. But, people like McDonnell, Mayor Bass don't get to have the last word.
Yes.
And we got to keep pushing and not lose heart, because maybe out of some of this friction, something good will come. But we do need to demand more, not less, of everyone.
Yes. And that's the beautiful part of tension, political tension. It matters, right? Because it moves things, right? It moves things. So tension is good, right? Demanding more from our elected officials is good. And I think, just kind of to wrap this up and also end it in a positive note, I feel like, one, right, I attended the LAPD commissioners meeting, so y'all didn't have to, because it's kind of really depressing. And I think the thought I had in that meeting was like, and what I've had to recognize as a Sanctuary Coalition, as NDLON, we've also been working with other smaller cities. I've been attending so many council meetings. And every time I attend kind of these localized council meetings, like just to agree with you, Chris, like I always feel so depressed because I'm like, damn, is this the democracy we're fighting so hard?
Totally.
We're fighting so hard to save, right? Totally. And I think yesterday, right, one of our leaders, Sela leaders joined me at the commissioners meeting. And as soon as kind of public comment ended, like, she was like, I need to get the fuck out of here. That shit was insane. And we know we had lunch in Little Tokyo. That's what I always do, right? Like, after crazy meetings, just eat good food. And I remember I was telling her, I was like, dude, like, is this really the fucking democracy that they're fighting so hard to save? And I feel like throughout the day, I was just reflecting on this. And it's like, no. Like, the democracy we're fighting so hard to save is a democracy that the people of LA and everyone across the country who is fighting ICE, it's the democracy that we're building every day. That's the democracy I'm fighting so hard to save. And I feel like that helped me kind of turn things around, because it is so easy to get depressed and to be like, are these really our leaders, right? And I feel like, no, like, the leaders of LA are the people. And as I mentioned to Jim McDonnell yesterday, like, ever since the June 6th raid began, the protests at the federal building have never stopped. Every day, every night, there are people there, because that is the fighting spirit of LA. That is the democracy that we're building. And that is, like, how we believe. And, for folks that grew up here or live here, like, also the city is ours. Like, this city does not belong to LAPD. It does not belong to our fellow politicians. It belongs to the people, right? And like, for me, it's just like, that is the democracy I'm working so hard to save, the one that we get to build every day, because folks in leadership aren't building democracy. Yeah, so that's my rant.
Well, I'm not going to top that. I mean, I think that's exactly it. It's the right note. You and I will not be invited to the Christmas dinner at the mayor.
Chris and I don't get invited to a lot of
at the mayor at City Hall this year.
Hall meetings.
And
photo ops.
But that's okay. That's okay. And by the way, love for Karen Bass and other stuff she's doing, and people in City Hall or people who want to whatever. But like, that's not. Yeah. Anyhow, I'm ruining your.
No, I'm saying.
Let's edit this out. You ended the. On the right note. We're going to build the democracy we fight. Yeah.
But also, we might not get invited to the photo ops, but we did get invited to a lot of carne asadas.
This is true.
So I think we win.
This is true.
So thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you, Chris. And I hope, honestly, I hope this is only the first time. I know you're hella busy, but I feel like there's so many other things we could talk about, and I hope to have you back on the show many, many times.
But thank you for having me on. Let's do it again. Except for let's try to get some air conditioning so we don't, I'm sweating. Yeah. I'm partially sweating because of the topic of Jim McDonnell, but also because it's hot in here. And so...
See these conditions, we
could do it outside. We could do it Amtrak. We're talking about Amtrak.
We're trying to do it on the Amtrak. So if the Radio Jornalera team could walk us through if an Amtrak episode could be possible.
Put headphones and have
Yeah, because Chris and I, right, yes, this is we were going to work together here at NDLON, but we're actually long time just desmadre homies.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.